It's April 20th, 420, if you like. My name is Ben.
I'm Luke.
And we are Pukajay Productions. We're doing another podcast today. This is, I think, podcast number 5 we're up to?
Yes, yeah, so many. I can barely keep track.
Got to start somewhere, yes.
Right.
We're pushing these out. So, how's it going, Luke?
It's going pretty well, actually. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I am good.
It's a lovely day down
actually,
in Southern California.
It is up here too. The rain stopped finally. I mean, it seems like it's dying off, but man, I'm ready for summer to get started up here. I can tell you that.
It's been sunny down here. I brought KT along with me here
did?
today. He's going to check out some Ollantaytambo in 3D with us.
Yes, well,
as far as I know, he didn't get to go there himself. So
I'm paying homage to the Black Spider-Man.
Yes,
the man
dude,
himself.
That's a great shirt.
I found it on the internet. I had to have it. I saw a picture of the internet, and that
was one of my favorite
relentlessly searched. Yeah, this is I like this shirt. I always get to giggle when I use it to travel sometimes, and it's a conversation piece occasionally. It's fun. Yeah, like you said, Ollantaytambo is going to be the main thing we check out today. But we've got a few other things to look at. But if you haven't joined us before, you don't know what we're about, Pukajay Productions, we're doing podcasts and we're working on a documentary, producing media, if you like, just looking at all of the new evidence and research that's going on that supports a different view of the past. It's something that to make us reevaluate our view of history. We've had this idea of history that really only happened in the last 10,000 years, but turns out there was quite a big event that happened just before our view of history started that may have wiped out some sort of high civilization before that. And there's lots of people working in this field, and we're out here doing the same sort of thing. You can see our contact address here. We've got pukajay.com. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and recently we're now on Patreon and PayPal. So we've set up those methods if anyone wants to actually help us continue our work and continue us. We are going to need funding.
Me a sandwich.
Yes, we are begging for shekels to continue this work in some way, and we just recently got those set up. So check those out. The links will be in below in the video. Yep,
it's pretty exciting stuff. I'm definitely trying to keep track of all the social media stuff.
It's good. Yeah, we do quite active on Instagram. We post a lot of content on Instagram. Shout out to Doug Keenan, who is our first donor actually on Patreon. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. We're still getting our act together a little bit on the Patreon stuff, but we've got some plans in terms of setting up goals and specific objectives and sticking to a pretty regular content schedule. Yeah,
we do appreciate it.
Yeah.
Before we get started today, I wanted to mention actually really, really quickly, if you hadn't noticed, they just finished piecing together a statue of Ramses II that they found in the 50s. It was in about 8 billion different pieces, and they just Humpty Dumpty'd that back together. And
where is this?
It's now at Luxor.
Luxor.
They've got it, outside the entrance to Luxor. It's now up there in lights, so you can see yet another statue of Ramses II.
Okay.
But it's pretty cool that they actually finished piecing it back together.
Yet another statue with Ramesses named on it, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Whether it's him or not, we can argue about till the end of time.
Yes. So a couple of little topics to run through before we get to Ollantaytambo. So again, the idea is we've got lots of really nice HD stabilized footage that from our various site visits. We've both been there a few times. Talk a bunch about that, but there's, as usual, like to touch on some of the other events and news and just little things that are happening in this sphere of ancient history kind of research. And I think, Luke, you wanted to start with something in China that was news to me as well. But let me flip over
this is something. I mean, I've known about this site for a little while, but I hadn't really looked into it. But as we were preparing to talk about Ollantaytambo, I remembered a site in Russia and also a site in China that sort of reminded me. This guy does not have a stabilized camera, so hold your lunch.
Yeah.
But I remembered a couple of sites that had megalithic structures that sort of reminded me of Ollantaytambo a little bit. And this is one of them. This is a quarry in China called the Yangshan Quarry. And as I looked into this, I just wanted to talk about it for 5 minutes today because it's got a very interesting backstory, which is as a lot of these megalithic structures are, you find that they've got some kind of backstory which doesn't make sense, and this is another one.
Mm-hmm.
They claim this is only about three massive megaliths here, and one of them is about 40 meters long and something like 18 meters high, and the next one's a little bit smaller.
Yeah,
and
they're
the third
huge.
one's
Look at
a little
them.
bit smaller. They're absolutely massive. And the one that's behind that has almost been carved out from the hillside underneath it in its entirety. And the story behind it is that there were these 600 years ago, they were going to make a dragon megalith out of 3 interlocking parts, and they were going to move it somewhere and for the emperor and have it be the biggest, most impressive megalithic statue ever. And they did all this work, and they carved all of this out, and then they went, how are we going to move this? Oh, we can't move it. You know what? Let's call it off. We'll just leave it there. And so that's the official story.
That's the Yangshan Quarry, in China. And so these are the monoliths. These are the pieces that they were going to move. These are the pieces. I think so the piece on the left there was going to be the head, and then this was going to be the body, and there was like a third. There was a third piece that sort of. Those are some big stones
middling size.
And this is limestone from what I read, right? It's not. This isn't a hard stone, but.
Yeah, they're absolutely massive. I think what I was reading is that the largest one is over 1,600 tons.
And Baalbek territory.
Yeah, and the other ones are, 800 tons.
This is impressive here.
This one's like 6.
This whole wall here is just this. Yeah, I mean, this is a lot of work. It's reminiscent of some of the Hanan Pacha stuff, which we'll talk about.
It looks very Hanan Pacha. If you look, the one that's on the side there, if you look at the right side of that as it like goes past, and we might even have one of the pictures, might have a shot of it, but
let's look at the pictures.
It looks just like some of the stuff you see behind Sacsayhuaman, the way that this side of the wall has been cut out, and like the smoothing on the front looks, similar to some of the scooping corn.
These aren't our pictures, just to
these
clarify.
Are not our pictures. I found these on I think it's megalith.org.
Oh, this thing here, yeah, look at that.
Yeah, through the thanks to Rob Gottfall on Facebook.
Rob Gottfall, yeah, he's great. Actually, shows a lot of great content.
Yeah, he does, and and now look at the right side of that down at the bottom.
Is this here? You mean? Oh, over here?
No, this one, yeah. That to me, like you remember when we were walking through, the backside of Sacsayhuaman, so to speak, and all of those stones that have been turned over, and like the upside down sort of staircases and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you see an awful lot of stuff that is just like that.
Wow.
In the sort of Peruvian Hanan Pacha stuff, and to me this looks really similar to a lot of that Peruvian stuff. It's even got the big knobs.
The knobs, these weirdly formed knobs, and that's a funny thing. It's kind of illogical to think that, okay, we're going to go to the effort of planning a statue. So apparently these are people that have done this before, right? This is the other thing to consider. When you look at a lot of megalithic works, this is a funny thing. And sometimes they try and attribute this in Egypt. They say there was trial passages on the Giza passageway. What we don't see in a lot of the megalithic work is practice, is things where you can see apprentices that are working up to the end of it, particularly South America. You either see it's either megalithic or it's not, but there's not a lot of these in between phases. There is some say Göbekli Tepe was maybe a function like that as a training site, but that's what you expecting. My point is that the people that making this and planning this, if we're going to be using monoliths and stones like this, then you consider the project all the way through, like the Chinese, and you say 600 years ago, so it's dynastic China. Then those empires, I mean, I've been to China, I don't know how many times. I'm used to work in IT, or I'm taking a break from IT as long, depending on how much Patreon support we get for this sort of stuff is going to sort of determine the length of that break at some extent. But I mean, I've been there a dozen or two times, and I've been to the wall, I've been through the Forbidden City, and they didn't do things by halves. Like this, they planned things out, and it was obviously master craftsmen.
Right.
The point being, they're not going to go to this effort of, we're going to make this thing, and all of a sudden, how do we move these stones? Wait, we did all this. We spent years carving these things. How do we move these things?
It's absolutely ridiculous to think that all of a sudden they would sit there and realize that. And the only way that I could see in just the brief 2 hours of research that I put into this, that they attribute it to this particular dynasty, because they say this was the same dynasty that built the treasure fleet and the Forbidden City. Now, the treasure fleet was built out of wood. The Forbidden City, I believe, is wood, right?
It is, yeah. So it's the biggest wooden palace complex in the world. It's actually 900. It's really cool.
So using like some boats and a wooden palace as sort of proof that this dynasty
does not a story make, right?
And
so
then,
what
the
we
legend
see
that goes with it makes no sense. There's
right.
like you said, there's no way that you plan the 3 pieces, how they're going to interlock, like where you're going to put them, and then do 80% of the work, and then realize that you can't move though. You know what you can move.
Yeah, right. You plan it out. The point is, I think that the idea here is what the official story that we hear and are told as part of history is people making up. They're looking at something. They're trying to fit it to an established story. Like there is the frame of reference by which we create these orthodox histories says that nobody, if we don't have the capability, or we know that the Chinese didn't have the capability, or something like that, right? You have to try and make it fit this picture of the past, and that's what you have. And I mean, that the only thing I've got to say to the people that come up with sort of stuff, and I mean, this is a real issue with history. I mean,
shame on you. Shame on you.
Shame on you.
Shame on you.
Indeed.
Shame on you.
A few shame on yous for you there. That's actually Zahi Hawass saying that to Graham Hancock. But we're going to use that a little bit here and there.
I love that recording.
Yeah. But anyway, that's interesting. You know, I had something else that I was going to quickly touch on too. Again, and I won't spend much time doing this, but just something that I like to come back to again and again, which is this topic of the Younger Dryas. So we've got a video that talks through the Younger Dryas. We use it as we talk about it quite a bit. I'm going to do some more videos on it. I'd like to do another version of that Younger Dryas video. That was an excerpt from our first podcast, and I think I can probably be a little more clear. But there's a lot of science behind this. The evidence that suggests that the Younger Dryas cataclysm, all of the climate change that happened around that period of time, that's shown in ice core samples, was the result of a comet impact. Now, without getting into all of the details, there is a Comet Research Group that's out there looking at this now. You see it here. It's cometresearchgroup.org. And just to run through it, I mean, there's already been a tremendous weight, and this is, again, Graham Hancock in his books, and these guys, they talk about this quite a lot. Graham's really championing this. But there's an awful lot of scientific weight already behind this theory, and it's got to the point where I think in certain circles in the sort of scientific peer-reviewed community, this is now the very strong case, if you like, for what caused and what happened in the Younger Dryas, what made all of the megafauna go extinct. There's been a number of papers that have come up and objections raised to this theory as it's been developed over, and this is really only stuff that's happened the last 15 years. Again, every time, you know, this is new work that really affects our view of the past. You can see all of these papers here. I mean, there's I don't need to read through all of the different examples, but you can get on the website and go and look at these actual peer-reviewed published papers. They're all free to view. You don't have to pay to see any of this stuff. But there's been some arguments that have come back against the Younger Dryas comet impact, and every single one of those arguments has been just categorically shot down and shut down. I mean, in fact, there's some papers here that actually address specifically some of the concerns and I guess the questions and criticisms raised of it, which is good. This is science, like peer-reviewed process, and it's. I want to be clear too that that's kind of how and we are approaching this too. It's the scientific method. These topics and these theories, and in a lot of cases, everybody's got theories and proposals and hypothesis on how these happen. They have to stand up to that fire of criticism and the debate. That's the whole peer-reviewed process. And you know, there's a whole lot in history, and particularly the soft sciences, history, archaeology, Egyptology, that don't really go through that process, or it's certainly a different process almost than what happens in some of these more hard sciences like the paleoclimatology, all of the analysis of the black mat layer, the nanodiamonds, all that type of thing. So just a note, just to say that this stuff's out here. If you're looking to get a better understanding of what happened in our past, there's an awful lot of weight behind the evidence that the bloody big comet rammed into the planet about 12,800 years ago, and it's all out here on the web, free to read, and get some education in. It's at least even just reading the first part of these papers, that the summary is the abstract is you'll get a good picture of just how much weight of evidence there is behind this now.
Yeah, it does seem to make an awful lot of sense, and you know, it sheds some light for sure on ancient civilizations and some of the remnants that we have behind, and you know, how could it be that
right. Yes,
this is here and made this way, and such and such.
And something else, just before we get to Ollantaytambo, that I wanted to kind of get to. I don't know. I mean, this is just a bit of fun, really. But you often get, and I've seen, we get pushback and some criticism, and there's lots of interesting theories that come out there. One of my favorites have been over the years is hearing about how within that orthodox framework of history, the proposals for how ancient cultures moved around really heavy stones and moved around the really big stuff. Like there's a lot of sort of facets to this problem, right? As you've got the actual cutting and movement of the stone, you've got the transport of the stone, you've got whole other areas that deal with the actual precision surfaces and the planning and what it takes to fit those sort of things together. But this was a video I just saw the other day, and it's got nearly 100,000 views. And you'll notice the dislike ratio is about 50% of the likes. It's kind of
pyramids.
The pyramids. That's pretty dramatic right away.
I like the music.
Stonehenge.
Feels like Howard Shore got in there with the soundtrack.
The large sculptures of Easter Island.
Yes.
Easter Island.
The Mayan pyramids. The 500-ton megaliths of Israel's Western Wall.
It's not a site I've looked at in a great deal, but there are megalithic.
How did the
things
ancients move the massive stones from the quarry to the job site?
That's a very good
Sculptor
question.
Mario Jason may have solved what has baffled archaeologists and mathematicians for eons.
I love this. Look at this.
Man, 6 feet tall.
6 foot tall man.
6 feet tall.
Stone, 300 tons.
300 tons.
How were they moved?
Let's see what they think.
Trees were cut.
Yes, okay, on board.
The trees were then bound together.
That's fine. With rope and just primitive tools, got it.
They were then crushed under the 300-ton
Notches were cut in the stone.
Okay, notches were cut in the stone.
What's interesting is I've seen an awful lot of these stones. I haven't seen too many of those.
You don't see a lot of notches. Wait, there's not only these notches on the side, but part of the series also.
Yes.
Wait for it. I love the music though. Good animation.
I feel like the orcs are coming
inserted
out of Mordor for this music.
Listen to this. I
like
the trees were then
how
inserted.
Deep is that drill hole?
No, the whole way through.
The trees were then inserted into the notches, and the legs were attached to the trees.
Okay, so we drilled 16-inch holes into granite to insert a tree.
All the way through.
Show me someone doing that. I mean, it's just okay. And then the rest.
I noticed there's a lack of sand in this diagram.
Yeah, there's a lack of sand and milk. There needs to be more milk being thrown in front.
Maybe that's why the background's all white. That's all supposed to be milk.
It could be all milk. Got it. Yeah. By the way, we're making reference to one of the other theories of how they move this around, which is a new thing, like the wooden sled theory in Egypt.
Yes, they poured water.
Yeah, they poured water, and not only milk, because the fat then gets under and somehow makes it.
Well, this is the thing. They said it was water, but if you read the hieroglyphs, there's somebody pouring like a jug of liquid in front of a stone.
Oh, right.
It's actually a statue. It's actually a statue on a sled, and maybe that is how they move some statues around. But
I'm sure they did.
So they came out with this whole theory about how they watered down the sand. But if you actually read the hieroglyph, it says milk. So how many cows were they milking to
pave the way?
Yeah,
for some of those stones, and then
do you remember
stones of King's Chamber lift them up 175 feet off the ground too, but never mind that.
Right. Well, you might remember too. This kind of thing just kind of gets spread around because when we were staying at when we were in Egypt, we stayed at the Sphinx Mercure.
Yeah.
I don't recommend eating anything there, but the hotel itself is okay.
It's okay. Yeah, unless the Mina house is the best, but
yes,
wants to pay that
definitely. Much. Right. But they had up at the upstairs dining room, if you remember.
They had the pictures up there.
The night we dared, they had these paintings on the walls of the ancient Egyptians moving the stones around outside the pyramid, and it's literally 6 guys with some rope.
Well, watch
just
this
pulling like a 3-ton block across the sand.
Here's a theory. I love this too.
This minimizes the amount of energy used and
minimizes
the amount of people required to move those heavy stones.
You only need 3 guys. Look,
even moving heavy stones uphill or downhill with this system would be much easier because there is less surface area touching the ground than having to.
You were going to 300 tons. Even if you're trying to use leverage like this wood, this half of this wood would shatter. You're talking. And again, where are the trees in Egypt? The cedar trees, like there's this, and these places where they come from, and often often case. This is the excuse why there's no trees on Easter Island.
Tube drill marks, but I've never seen a tube drill that's gone 16 feet through anything. I've never seen a tube
16 inches wide.
Go in, or 16 inches wide.
Well, you're talking about some big tree trunks to pull to get, because you're applying all that force. I mean, it's there is definitely leverage and things going on. I love this animation. Look at this.
On wood rollers.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them.
Aren't perfect or even.
And I did, okay, so we do a scale model. Can't get 6 guys together to move a 300-ton stone.
2 to 10 tons, a cradle made out of wood with the same type of movement would do much better than the old system of pulling.
I love
especially when going
this part here
around.
with the actual how the post is popped out of the hole. And mind you, you're also talking about like these length poles on the, and I'll add my head in here so I can show you what I'm talking about. But the long poles that are going in here, like this isn't a straight hole in this whatever wooden blocks on the bottom.
Right.
And I'm wondering how these wooden blocks on the bottom that are somehow, they must be dug into the ground or something to prevent them from moving before the stone moves. You know what I'm saying? Like it's whether or not there's more inertia on the stone to drag it, or those wooden pivot points on the ground are going to move, like they are in this example here. And like this one's popped out of its hole. These aren't straight down hole. Like this is, honestly, it's a little ridiculous, and it's, but it's just people trying to fit a narrative. It's people that if you're only trying to solve all of these problems, when you look around and you go, I can only solve these pictures, like the Great Pyramid, all these things, with this view of the past. And it's a circular logic of this problem. I know they couldn't do it that way because civilizations couldn't do that back then. Like the proof of them being able to do it is right in front of you. That's the circular logic, but they use the same thing to deny it. It's really weird.
Well,
yeah.
I would just like to refer this guy to the fact that the Egyptians were great chroniclers, and everything they did and everything innovative that they created, they made record of.
That's right.
They wrote it down or they painted it somewhere, and very noticeably, the things that are missing in these detailed descriptions of everything they accomplished are the construction of the pyramids and the Sphinx. So right away you're already sort of questioning that stuff. Now, some of the stuff, like some of the stone pottery, stone work that's been found underneath Zoser's pyramid, is at least undeniably 4,500 years old.
Oh yeah,
it's made out of corundum, breccia, various
crazy
types
stuff
of porphyry. Now there are decorations and descriptions like on the causeway of
Wenice pyramid,
some other places where they show that they have their stone pottery, and they have like a piece of stone sideways on a rod that they can turn like this, and that they would then be able to sort of put it down inside the neck and gradually increase this, and it would be a very long process. But the dynastic, the middle and later period, which is where you see a lot of that, but Wenice is early, so this is probably the earliest depiction we have of that. It's not clear what kind of stone they're using, and all the stuff that they managed to do on the outside of it, the necks and the very narrow holes through the side. It's kind of indicative that they had some other. That's all right. Pre-dynastic. It's so, they claim it's the Naqada.
Oh, it's
pre-dynastic civilizations before dynastic Egypt.
I think that we're going to do. We've been focusing on sites a little in these last 3 podcasts, but I'd like to switch. We'll look over to actually look at specific technologies and sort of specific out of place artifacts. I think would be a good one to do as a theme, just because there's so much of that in the museum, and we've got a lot of good stuff from the museum. It's really funny when you see these corundum jars, and Luke made ref, corundum's like a 9 on the Mohs scale. It's way harder than granite or anything else. You can really only work on it with diamond. There's these jars and things next to pottery, and they're called pre-dynastic. But let's be clear too that there is the depiction. So this is how Egyptology works, right? It's the pictures on and the what the Egypt, as Luke said, they were great chroniclers. They wrote down and they showed what they did. So that's why there's pictures of boats with obelisks on them. There's all these sort of things that are then saying, and the pictures of the guys grinding on stone. Now, it's quite possible that the Egyptians were doing things like that, but it doesn't explain how a lot of those other objects were made, and it certainly doesn't rule out that they inherited all that stuff. And they were trying to pay homage to it in the same way that when we build and the Egyptians build administration buildings and they build parking lot buildings and they whatever they're building over on the pyramid site, they mimic that architecture. They mimic the style. You're trying to stay in the theme. It's because we these sites are sacred. I mean, the ancient Egyptians were likely no different had they inherited all this stuff and built their culture, and they were probably much more closely connected to the pyramid builders and their culture.
And I think, as we're going to see,
they were that culture.
I think this is what the Incas were doing too. They were
absolutely
emulating this stuff that they had found to the best of their ability. And it's really the only logical explanation. We're going to go through a lot of the other explanations today.
Yeah. So let's. I
think you'll probably agree that realistically, this stuff was inherited.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And I like to reinforce that with a lot of this. I think that, and again, and particularly with the Egyptians, was the statues were of that culture. Like that, I think all the statues are antediluvian. Pyramid builder statue. Again, the writing came later, but the statues are of that culture, and that was the culture that the Egyptians were trying to mirror and maintain. And they obviously lost some capability from what was going on before the flood or immediately afterwards, just because that's all what's attributed as Old Kingdom, and it's undeniably the oldest. Even in the Egyptians' records, it's the oldest. Never mind that they talk about things like Khufu repairing the Sphinx, one of the first. But he's attributed as building it, but there's another stele that says he was just repairing it. I mean, they were trying to emulate that culture. I just think that's we're not saying that Egyptians didn't do a lot of this stuff and that they didn't do what's shown in the drawings and on and in all of their records. That likely happened, but it was done in order to try and mimic and maintain this culture that they've inherited. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I'm on board.
So Ollantaytambo, actually, before I go to there, let's just see where it is. I like to do this sort of thing. So from North America, Ollantaytambo, it's actually listed as a region of Cusco. It's just outside of Cusco, up in the Andes, in the high plateau there with Cusco in South America, central Peru.
Sort of the start, the Sacred Valley.
Yeah, it's actually at this kind of right at the almost where the valley comes to an end. It's a spectacular. So there's a whole list of sites there, as you can see where it is. And in fact, so there's a whole town. In fact, this is where you catch the train. You probably see the train line around here somewhere.
I think you are
this is the train line.
Pretty hard. I think your
network
conditions.
Let me just reshare for you, mate.
Network conditions there.
It's it'll record. Well, it's lucky we're recording on this end, I guess. So I'm looking at the overhead sort of Google Earth pictures of it. So you can see like the valley structure here. This is the Sacred Valley, right? So this is all through here is where the Sacred Valley goes. What was called the Sacred Valley, if you like. In Ollantaytambo, it's a town. People live there a lot. In fact, one of the guides that you'll see in a minute, he was born here, raised here.
Even if you go by the Orthodox history, it's one of the. It is the place actually that has had the longest continuous inhabitation in South America. Yeah,
and you can see the megalithic and the temple, what they call the temple aspects of it, right? And it's built onto the hillsides around this town. It's not just in the middle. There's stuff down on the ground, and this is the main area, if you like, over here, and the top of it's what's particularly interesting from a megalithic perspective. But also on the other hillsides behind it and around it, there actually are structures that are in. Whoop! I lost it. There are structures that are all part of it. There we go.
A lot of these, sites out here, you see. There's an author called Jesus Camara, who I think we're going to talk about.
We are
at some point during this, but
we'll do that now.
He's got a very interesting theory. His father was one of the original archaeologists just to work on these sites.
Yeah,
and
so
he classifies, the stonework into three very distinct and similar types, and Ollantaytambo is very similar, to a lot of the other megalithic sites in Peru and Bolivia, in that it exhibits all three types of these construction.
It does, and I'm definitely getting a network connections issue at the moment with this call. It's to my ISP.
Yes. Shame on you.
Yes. You were a little choppy there, but let's get into that, because Jesus Gamara and his father Alfredo they've been on the ground here doing. I think Jesus is in his 70s now. He's been 50 years of doing this his whole life. His father was 60 years of field research, and they've got a very, very interesting and unique perspective on how this architecture ties together, and actually ties into what you would typically call the Incan. That's his book. Incan mythology of kind of the upper world, the middle world, and the lower world. And there's Hanan Pacha is the lower world. I think it's Uran Pacha is the middle world, and then Ikan Pacha is the upper world. But and Jesus applies this to architectural styles. I think the way he identifies this stuff, and we'll get into exactly how he identifies them, is really, really interesting. I'm less on board with, I guess, him and his father's reasoning for how that happened, which has got to do with all sorts of orbital dynamics and different gravity levels and things like this.
Three different calendars.
Yeah, right.
And he actually extracts calendars from some of the, sort of Aztec and Inca sites, and hypothesized that the Earth at a certain point in its history had different rotational calendars. Like there was a while it only had a 260-day rotation, and there was a 200-day rotation. Now we have 365.
And somehow gravity was changed as part of it.
And he's got a theory that that gravity was slightly different, and that maybe affected their ability to move some stuff.
He has a good documentary. If you can go and find it, I've got it. You can buy it. I bought a copy of it. It's
Cosmogony of the
Three Worlds. Right.
It's an excellent documentary.
Yeah, actually, and particularly going through these architectural. So he did it in conjunction with a Dutch fellow, Peter. I can't remember his name. I'm sorry. Jan de Jong. Yeah, great. Particularly on it's convincing on the architecture alone. It's amazing. But what I wanted to maybe we'll show here is this is actually a clip from the first time I went here, and if you may recognize Santa Hancock, Graham's wife. Here, this was I was here with Jesus, with Graham Hancock, with Brian Forrester the first time I went down to South America. It was one of the trips that really got me going. I mean, I was already interested in this field, but really opened my eyes to some other things. First chance I had to meet Graham as well. But this is how those three worlds kind of apply to traditional Incan mythology, if you like. And it's a good little clip that talks about it. This is actually filmed at the top of Ollantaytambo, which we'll then revisit again when we look at. I think I've got about 15 minutes of footage here that we'll step through. But this is Rogerio, who was an excellent guide, who I think Brian still uses today. He's a great guide. Also quite open to the idea that you don't, because South America is very mysterious. A lot of the records and any data or sort of books or any written things were destroyed by the Spanish, obviously, so there's much less information about it. What we have comes down to us through the Spanish, which is kind of corrupted, just given their perspective on things. But he talks about it, you can see how he's open to it's the Inca, maybe it was the ancient people, which is not something you get with every guide, and we'll sort of get into that a little later. But yeah, let's just roll this in.
In front of this church there is really huge stones also, just throw like everywhere. So probably the major temple of the sun was down there. And here we don't know exactly what the Incas or these people or these ancient people want to make here. So the point here is that you can see this symbol again. Yeah? Look at here.
Yep. Pre-stabilized camera, so sorry for my...
Can you see the tree one? So the same philosophy that the Incas used, that the three levels of the world. Yeah? Ukupacha, Kaipacha, Hananpacha. So
just let me clarify. So Ukupacha, it's the other way around. I sort of said Hananpacha was the bottom and Uranpacha, and so he's doing it. I'm wrong. He's right. I mean, high world is Hananpacha, but that corresponds to the older stuff, which we'll get into. But he's just describing how they talk about the three worlds as three sort of dimensions.
I think astral. He's describing it differently from Jesus Gamara. I tend to go with Gamara's explanation because the way the Hananpacha is the oldest type of building style.
He's not talking about he's not making any reference to ages or any of that. He's talking about how those three terms, which are terms that are the same terms that
the underworld, the middle physical world, and the overworld.
Right, and they're the terms that Jesus uses to describe it, as well as how these are kind of used in traditional Incan mythology, which actually makes a lot of sense when you consider, if you think about like the higher world, the highest world, the highest achievements, the Hananpacha. anyway, he'll explain. But this isn't the architecture. This is more of the traditional Incan mythology.
What's interesting
of these
too
terms.
is that the Chicano, whenever you see it, almost 95% of the time, it's
this shape.
Yes, it's how it is in his hand. If you notice on the wall, there's two of them. There's one right behind his head, and there's one up above.
There's three of them on this wall, actually. There's 1, 2, 3.
Right. They're different. They've got way
Extra
more
levels.
Steps or extra levels.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I had the same observation. The Chicana being the Incan shape, the stepped cross, if you like. Typically in the megalithic stuff, when there's that shape, it's more levels, and I'm pretty sure it's the same at Tiwanaku, where they had the big Chicanas in the stone. Although they might actually be these exact Chicanas, but they also have just like 4 squared plugs at Tiwanaku. It's very bizarre. So we should really look at that site at some point too. It's really
also
amazing place.
Like you said, Ben had met Jesus before. And,
on this trip
we met him again later. In
2015, I think.
2015.
This is the second time
we invited him out to lunch. We had a meal and chat with him, and his English is much better than our Spanish, but there was still a lot of translating that had to be done. And we actually had a Mayan elder with us. She's been on the Mayan Council for over 20 years. Her name's Elizabeth Araujo. She's a lovely lady, and she and Jesus got into quite a spirited discussion about the calendar and the period.
I remember that.
The different calendars. And she was not happy with his interpretation, and
which
we had to smooth that over just a little bit.
We did, and that's a point we'll make too in here, is it because there's so little data, and in some cases you also have cultures that are much more directly connected to those ancient, and particularly the Inca and Maya cultures. It's a very sensitive topic. So the whole space is very conservative, right? There's, when you go down there, typically you'll get the guides. They'll tell you the Incans, they made everything. And that's just the way it is, and they'll explain away this, and we'll talk about how they explain away the different versions of this architecture, which we'll get into. But because it's very conservative, and I think Graham makes this point in his book, so very difficult. As soon as you can play around at the edges of things, like okay, there's sundials and more alignments and all this, but as soon as you cross over into that, it wasn't the Inca that made this and they inherited it. That's when you start getting it's not received very well. You just get attacked, and you're sort of on the out of bounds territory, and you'll be thrown out of the place. I mean, that's ideologically speaking, that's what happens.
We've definitely had our share of abuse.
Yeah, we did.
The Mother Earth level or under the ground. The second level is where we are live now, the present world. The other one is celestial world, which is in the sky. So all these 3 levels was symbolized for 3 animals: snake, puma, and condor. What we represent? Pumas. We are the second level here. So that's why in the next stone you can see kind of profiles of the bodies of pumas. Just probably the Spanish, they carry the heads part. But you can see clearly the tail part, all the body.
So he's saying that there was something carved on here, and it's supposedly a puma and a tail, but hard to say. Saying that maybe the Spanish hammered the heads off it. There's definitely puma architecture. In fact, we'll get into Napahuaca here in a minute. But
well, it's supposedly Cusco itself is
it is a big
built
puma
in the shape of a puma.
Yeah. Sacsay is the head of the tail.
Look at the body, but the head was
But yes, Sacsayhuaman and the so-called Inca Roca wall all have designs.
Yeah.
In various animals.
Yeah, well, you look into paw prints at Sacsay, but Sacsay, in terms of the Cusco and the actual head of the puma, that was Sacsayhuaman, from the overhead view.
Like that. But the point is that this temple, it wasn't finished. Why? Because when you go to the quarry sector, there is more stones waiting for these ancient people. We don't know exactly why they stopped this work.
Oh, I can give you a guess.
So most of the theories mention that probably if the Incas built that, so when the Spanish came in 15 centuries, so they had to stop this work. But probably it's more ancient.
Yeah.
yeah, more ancient. So the point is that just in the way, crossing the river, it was a hard work first. And close to the river, there is stones waiting for Incas or for these ancient people. And just here, one case from here, in the bottom
That's the
of the
quarry.
valley, there is two huge
For the granite on the top of you.
Right, up in the
it's on the next
distance.
mountain range.
It is. It's 6 kilometers away, and you've got to get it all down there from one piece and across the river, and then up the mountain on the other side.
That mark up there, that's the quarry. And there's a big river down there, so you've got to take it down a steep mountain, across the river.
So it's really hard to understand also that, yeah?
So really nice little work there, and Rogerio's born and raised in Ollantaytambo. He's doing this a long time. In fact, he's run around. Him and his friends have all, like, there's so many of these sites. They're all over the place, and we did get the chance to visit some of the, like the little cave site on a terraced hills top that really very few people get to go to. But he's making the same observation that I think you get to when you look at these places, which is, you know, this is there's such a different level of work and quality of work between the various types of architecture you see here.
Yes.
Yet, I mean, maybe Luke, you can tell us what the orthodox history is of Ollantaytambo. As far as I know, it was attributed. I mean, if you look at their books, they'll tell you that not only did the Inca build it, but it was just one king who built it in his lifetime, right? I mean, you've looked into this more than I have.
Well, yeah, there are, you know, sort of conflicting histories. It's dated to the late 15th century, according
Right.
to, you know, the history books. But you know, some books say, you know, that Pachacuti raised it entirely, that it already existed, and he raised it entirely and then rebuilt it, you know, for the nobles, sort of in the way that Tambo Machai was supposedly, you know, for the nobles. But like all of these sites, they're never finished. The beautiful architecture is never finished. It's always filled in with the Incan sort of rubble style, loose stone, field stone sort of technique, and it doesn't really explain anything. There's another in a book called Monuments of the Incas, which is actually really good book in some ways. It's got a lot of information on a lot of sites that not many people know about. But according to their research, you know, Pachacuti had defeated the tribe that lived there.
Right.
And they were the ones that built, you know, the megaliths, and then you know, the Incans just finished it off with their small stone technique. But that doesn't really make sense, because you see this type of technique up in Cusco with the Coricancha, and you see, you know, some of the stuff you know, elsewhere throughout Peru and Bolivia too. In you know, Macchu Picchu, you see some of this style stuff. So it kind of exists, and again, it's always the really special buildings that are central, that they always tell you are temples or for the nobles, but none of them are ever finished. And they all have been sort of built around, you know, by the Incan small field stone sort of technique. And in some cases emulated. They've done everything they can to emulate, you know, these wall styles, and some of it looks really good, but it's just not the same. Not the same thing.
That's right. And so let's get into those styles, and then we'll get into the video of Ollantaytambo and start identifying them. So we've been talking about Jesus Camara, we've been talking about Graham, and in fact, if you look at this little clip, this is actually all three of them together, filming.
Before we play, let me also just say, because he, you know, Rogerio was talking there about, you know, why they were, you know, that they weren't finished, or maybe they were older. And, you know, the history books, again, don't even agree. Some will tell you that it was the War of Succession between Huascar and Atahualpa that forced them to stop building that. Other people will say it was the Spanish conquest of Peru, or you know, the retreat of Manco Inca. This Ollantaytambo was the site of probably the most famous Incan victory over the Spaniards. They flooded the valley and absolutely kicked their ass, and the Spanish had to retreat before they lost everybody. And then there was not a return match, so to speak, because Manco Inca took his forces further down and you know, avoided another fight, and the Spanish did come down and take over the site.
Which is why Machu Picchu is so nice, because they never found it and they didn't get a chance to really wreck it, which
and
they
right
wrecked
next,
everything else.
yeah, right next to that that megalith, there's a really interesting piece, which to me is obviously looks like a ceiling or a roof or almost like a half lid piece, and it's huge, and they call that the platform with the carved seat, and it's clearly like not a seat thing. Like, you know, it's been put on top. That has been moved, I think, by the Inca. There's a variety of stones around the site. You'll see they're lying on small stones in various angles. With I think the Inca were trying to move the stuff that they had found.
You're talking about up on the top of the Ollantaytambo? You're talking about the big rocks on the top?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We've got all that footage. We'll get into that. And what I want to do is let's just look at the architectural styles, and we'll identify those, so then we can call them out when we watch it. So just to show who is who here. There's Graham at the back of Graham's head. Brian Forrester is filming
in the blue cap.
In the blue cap, and then
and that's green cap is Jesus Gamarra.
This is in the green cap here, right? This is Jesus explaining. About probably one of the monoliths we were looking at the Hananpacha stuff around Sacsayhuaman. So again, we've made reference to his books and his videos. Let's take a quick look at those architectural styles in detail. So here's an example of, we will zoom and fit the image, that'd be better. So this is Ollantaytambo. You get a couple different things here. Actually, before we go into, let's do this first.
Yeah, this scoopy stone right here is
Hananpacha.
What Jesus would refer to as Hananpacha, the old style. And the old style of the Hananpacha, it's almost always one stone, one large stone.
It's living
with
rock.
These shapes, scopes, shapes and scoops and marks cut into it in various ways that they often like to say are Incan thrones or something.
Yeah, or quarries or things. But this is often distinguished. I like to call it monolithic. It's one piece, as you said, but it's also usually living rock. It's like bedrock, or it's mountains, or it's actually seems to be what's in place. Although not always. Sometimes it's huge boulders, like at Sacsayhuaman, and
it usually has a very obvious like vitrification.
So it's
effect on stuff.
Right, and it's definitely so in Jesus' theory, and I'd agree with this, because typically on this stuff the erosion always looks like it's way older than all other stuff. The erosion is typically way worse on a lot of this stuff, which is the monolithic single piece stuff versus and it's separate from the cellular blocks of things like the wall at Sacsayhuaman. But you get all of these mixed in at a lot of these sites. One thing you can notice too, and this is really good examples of this even at Machu Picchu, particularly at Machu Picchu.
Yes.
Of this culture, this is the Hananpacha, the upper world, or the oldest stuff. It's revered and venerated by the following architectural styles, because it's usually treated with the utmost respect. It's protected with walls, and if it's been built upon, it's done very, very carefully and almost lovingly in the way that it embraces
it's left,
the pieces.
It's not removed.
That's right.
It's definitely built around. It seems to be like the Holy of Holies. It's like the most interior space in a lot of these sort of constructions.
Temple of Karnak. This is an example of this. I think the stuff in the middle of the Coricancha looks like this. I think that even the rock when they saw about the Temple Mound in Jerusalem, right? With that's supposedly the and if you look at, that's what Jesus says in his documentaries. That's Hananpacha, because it's this one. It's the rock. It looks similar to a lot of the stuff you see in Peru. Right. So
of course, isn't there some kind of rock? And I'm not a Muslim, but isn't like at Mecca when they walk in the circle around the thing? Isn't there some kind of black rock?
The wailing stone or something? Yeah, I think he makes reference to it.
I don't know what it's.
I'm not sure.
No.
So then you've got Hananpacha, then you've got the Uranpacha, right? And this is the middle culture. This is the cellular stuff.
The cellular
megalithic
style, and it's the same stuff that you see at Sacsayhuaman, but it's the same stuff you see here and also at the Coricancha, and you can't really
Cusco,
you can't separate any of that stuff. It's all the same culture,
right? And it's
the same building techniques, and that's always around. These monoliths, these Hananpacha monoliths.
Well, there's two different styles. So this happens in some. It often when this style's been built, the Uranpacha is it's the perfect megalithic stuff. It's the the stuff, the walls that are fit so closely together, the walls of Sacsayhuaman, and in Peru you see two different categories. In fact, if you watch our Brian Forrester interview, he gets into the two categories of the Urumpacha, which is there's the oblong and the no straight lines. I'm thinking of the walls at Sacsayhuaman and the Inca Roca wall in Cusco.
Cellular.
Really all over the place in terms of angles and cuts, but then you have another style of this where it's very straight lines. You almost see it here in some things, but you'll tip like the Coricancha.
It is deceptive.
Almost straight, but not quite. But two different styles.
It looks totally straight to your eye, like the Coricancha,
Right.
but when you get up and look at it, you'll see that there's lips on the top of all the blocks that form little like shark fins, but they're really small.
Yeah.
And the block above is cut to fit that, but you almost don't notice it.
And typically no tool marks on this stuff. It's as if it's been just shaped and pushed in, and then it shares also the vitrification that you get with the Hananpacha. So when we say vitrification, it's the same thing you see in a lot of cases in Egypt, certainly same thing you see on the boxes in Egypt, where you have a shiny surface, like the granite, whatever the stone. It's always usually, again, these two styles. The other thing, well, particularly this style, the Urumpacha, it's hard stone, it's one type of stone, and it's been brought usually from a long way away. It doesn't matter where it came from. It's whoever built it, they were determined to use the one type of stone. Didn't matter where it came from. That it was for whatever reason they used it. And it's got that same sort of shiny, it reflects light. You actually see walls in Cusco where one side's this old megalithic and the other one is the Inca style, which is what you see on top of this. And one side reflects light with your torch, the other side doesn't. And that's vitrification. And same thing happens in Egypt with vitrification. It's how you identify a lot of this stuff. And the tool markings are typically much different. And then you have Ikanpacha, or bottom world, Ikanpacha. And that is, in Jesus's theory, that's your Incan work. And that is what you see on top here. And here's another example of Urumpacha, which is these large, and these are the big stones on top, right? Some of these are 30, 40, 50 even in the front wall, tons.
Look at the side, bigger. Look at that knob on that stone right down the left. Yeah. And then think about that stuff we just looked at in the Yangshan
Quarry
in
China, right? And then the Ikanpacha is the work that's in between it. So all of this stuff that's piled up, loose stones again. This will be typically the Ikanpacha, the Incan work. Local stone. They pick it up where they found it. They use it. It's not precise. It's not. It's usually just laid there, and then the Spanish used concrete. The Incans didn't. But this is what you typically would call Incan work. Now, if we look at the whole site here, so here's an overview. Oops, sorry, bumped my mic. Overview of the whole site. So this is the main area, right? It's a big hilltop that you walk up. On the right-hand side in these walls, this is all Ikanpacha. So this is all terracing, all work done by the Incan civilization. Absolutely. Like this was done to probably rebuild this site after it was left in ruins from, I don't know, I wonder what could have happened back in the distant past that might have knocked all these megalithic things down. But you can see also that it's not the same quality as the row of stones along the bottom. And we'll get up to much more detail of this, the stuff that's at the top. Like the megalithic work at the top of this site is breathtaking, and it's supported by all this crappy work that's all around it. Not crappy, but definitely a different quality. It's this. I love this site because it's so the difference in craftsmanship and the different types of architecture here. Really, best examples are up on here, and the ridiculousness of attributing this to not only one civilization, but one lifetime of one king is just. It's a little hard to stomach once you see this sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, it's clearly obvious that he who hauled and made these big blocks and these big stones wasn't this. I mean, why do you do this? And here's the wall at the top. This is the megalithic stuff. It's spectacular, but it's been repaired. I mean, the Incans found this site in ruin and they repaired it. Same as they did to Cusco. Same as they did to most of these other sites.
They repaired it.
Here you go.
It's best. And yes, this is the picture I've been waiting for. Look, they did a really good job.
It's great.
When you go out there today and find stones that fit together and try to make it work with no mortar and have it stand up for it's good work, but it's not. No. It's not the Urumpacha work. It's not same on the same. It's not anywhere close to it.
And you can even see that the Hanan, what probably is Hananpacha on the right hand side here, where they built against it, which is the living rock. I mean, they were very respectful of the living rock. These stones were not like these have come from somewhere else. A lot of these the megalithic stuff comes from the stuff in the middle.
Macchu Piccu, a lot of these sites have that that stuff where it's just built into the rock, even sometimes jutting out over great precipices, and they've built up this incredible structure on top of the bedrock. It's amazing. So there are, that was a little bit of a crash.
So that's crash course in those three types.
The three types.
The architectural types. If we pay attention, you'll see them all over the place here. So I'll just get this rolling. I'll just let this roll, and we can talk.
Spanish complained when they were attacking this place. By the way, they must have had a wall out here like they do now for defense, but the door was so small that the Spanish actually had to crawl through it. So you can imagine crawl through one by one, trying to attack this place with all the Incans up on the hillside. Must have been a really bad day to be Spanish.
Yeah, it was a hell of a hill if they were trying to fight up it. You'll see here also, if you ever go down to Peru, I highly recommend it, but there's all sorts of opportunities for commerce, as you'll notice.
Yeah, off to the right there, if you don't go straight up the Incan Terrace, I think Ben went back over there because our guide was out of control. And really, at one point, I think you see me thinking about whether I should just throw him off the edge. But there's a lot of Hanan Pacha stuff around the corner. A lot of these sites
we'll get down there.
A lot of great Hanan Pacha stuff.
Yeah. So
again, if you don't wander around, you don't see.
You can see here clearly megalithic on the bottom, different quality of work to what's been reconstructed on the terracing above.
But again, look at the those alcoves there in the Incan style wall.
We'll get into that.
I mean, that is it's they were very conscious about imitating and carrying on what was done in the other style. Here's more scoop marks.
So some beautiful scoop marks there. I actually missed those the first time. Yeah, look at that. There's some lovely scoop marks in here. You can. This is this characteristic of the Hanan Pacha work, which is the living rock, and you see scoop marks in the sacks even, but also scoop marks on the Uran Pacha, because all the Saxe Waman walls have some scoop marks. It's as if, and honestly, this is if you think about it, on how when you look at the knobs, and if you imagine that stone as being a toffee-like consistency, it sounds hard to believe, but imagine you had a hard stone, you pushed in that stone, and it filled up all those spaces in these walls, and as it cooled, it sort of filmed off. These knobs formed naturally as it cooled, as if they had some way to change that stone. I think, as silly as it sounds, I mean, it makes so much sense.
Well, if you look at like a tub of ice cream with an ice cream scooper going through, and you look at the mark in the ice cream afterwards, it looks exactly like that.
Yeah.
But that, by the way, what we were just looking at, they refer to as like the princess's bath. There aren't very many of those in all of Peru. There are a few of them.
I think we get back to the water.
Tambo Machai, I think Tupan has a couple of things like that. But something very special.
As with most of these sites, this running water coming through here, megalithic sites and power places, wherever, they often have running water, and this is no different. In fact, they've done a good job to maintain this through to the present day. And a lot of the fountains, and particularly there's a really, really amazing shaped carved block where the water falls over it, and we'll get down there. But you can see it's all, this whole site's been built into this hillside, and this is characteristic of this civilization down here, the Incans and even perhaps the people before them. But man, they did a lot of work. Hilltops terraced to like you wouldn't believe as you go all the way down south, Lake Titicaca, and you can actually see they call them granaries or grain storage silos or something. But all of this stuff on this hillside over on the right there has all been carved off. This was interesting. So this is Hanan Pacha work for sure. And you see
again, remember that quarry we just looked at in China.
Yeah, this looks a lot like that, right, with those knobs.
Had some stuff going on the side. Anyway, this is our really, I recommend avoiding this guide at all costs. But one of the things, he's written a couple of books, one of the things that actually his best work that I think that he's done shows that a lot of these sites with the knobs, some of them at various solstices and equinoxes at a certain time of the day when the sun comes over and it shines on one side or other of these knobs, it creates shadow patterns that he believes look like the mother's face, or he's got photographs of these.
Like a ceremony where you're cupping into the shadow.
Is that these things made like like shadows on the stone that bear, that represented various things.
Yes,
but
Mark has done some great work on the astrological alignments, particularly the sun and the sun alignments with a lot of these places. And you find that some of his work also shows that a lot of the ancient Cusco streets were actually lined up specifically to catch the sun in certain times. And I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. I think that obviously whoever was building these ancient megalithic cultures had intimate knowledge of the heavens and the cosmos, and they were tied into it. I mean, this is the way that, I mean, the equinoxes and the way things lined up on equinoxes and what was clearly astrological alignments in places like Giza. Yeah, the heavens were important to them, and I don't have any doubt that he's discovering some things that those people were calculating. By the way, there's not a lot of, I don't think the Incans had any real knowledge that is known about, really detailed understandings of the heavens and things, yet a lot of these monuments, and particularly the old stuff, clearly show that was a factor when they built them. And again, all running water through all of these. This is going past this is on ground level, if you like, in the valley.
You were on top of older. When you were looking at that water stuff just a few minutes ago, you can see it's older stuff with newer stone on top of it.
Yeah. And it's not always the case.
They're really old. This has been so repurposed, this site.
You can see all these,
in so many places.
All the Hananpacha work on the wall here. And there's one of my favorite things is it comes up, I think, when we come back. But you can see all these blocks. These look at the beautiful angles. You see a lot of this stuff down at Tiwanaku as well. This was all megalithic, and whatever happened, it knocked it all down. Yet look at the work behind it. You simply can't
see this wall right in front of us, right there. Hopefully, I'm not lagging too much behind, but that is the Coricancha outer wall underneath the cathedral. It's the same type of construction. It's the same type of stone.
It's the same alcove shape.
You could take that and drop that next to that wall and the cathedral, and you'd think you were in the same place.
Yeah, you've seen this on pause now. You caught up.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, it's paused. Yeah. So again, and you look at the wall behind it, like all of this wall. In fact, there's you can look at this at a certain angle. Looks like a condor head. It's really cool. But yeah, there's clearly a mix of architectural styles here. That's what I love about this site is you're looking at all these massive blocks down the bottom. If you had the capability to make these blocks and bring them and make walls out of them, then why do this? Why do this? Like where it's rough stone and mud and just like filler. Nothing's precise. I mean, they're nice walls, but it ain't this wall. It ain't this.
It ain't that.
It's not this. And it's not even close. I mean,
let's do something really special for a temple or for a noble. Then why do you never finish it? Why are all of them, absolutely every single one? Why is every single one of them unfinished?
Yeah,
and even the stuff that Macchu Picchu, which was never destroyed or attacked or found by the Spaniards, it's unfinished.
And the possibilities for me in reality is that they may have been either building these when the cataclysm came. I love this. This is my favorite thing over here. One of my favorite things, just to think about as a practical sort of masonry exercise. It will get up close to this. There's a nice block on the ground here, but the quarry, what they call the quarry here, these cuts out of the bedrock. My question: look at the rectangle on the bottom here. I think I focus up on it. Anyone wants to tell me how they cut that back piece out of the rock? I'd love to understand it, because as far as I can tell, that right there, that's a square. And it's got square, and if you get in there, it's sort of straight edges and straight corners. And this is a lip of rock that comes out.
Yes, right.
Someone did a cut at the back. Someone cut that out. I mean, did you just hollow it out? Or if that's a quarry, you're pulling a piece out. How'd you make that cut? I mean, what's the point of making the straight cuts if all you're doing is just removing material to make? It's not a quarry. Like it's where's the? You know what I'm saying? There's the logical inconsistencies of either calling that a quarry or a throne.
Right, and so if it's not a quarry, why are you getting in there and smoothing that wall out in that particular shape? There's
And if it is a quarry, how'd you make the back cut? How'd you pull that piece out?
And where did you take that stone? There's a lot of very interesting, very specific shapes that are cut out at these quarries, and you never see those shaped stones anywhere. So
yeah. So we're a little further up here. We've hiked up here. We've had some and actually get a nice overview of the stuff down below.
It's a beautiful place. This is just under 10,000 feet. So
no. You're up high here. This is at about 11. This is at 11 and a bit. The only thing under 10,000 feet is Macchu Picchu. Everyone thinks Macchu Picchu is way up in the air. It's actually about 800 feet. But Cusco's at 11.5. I think this is at 11. You go further south, you go up even higher. There's Macchu, my favorite guy. So Macchu, I mean, he's when I mentioned before the conservative approach and being tied to that culture, like he feels that directly. Right? He calls himself a shaman. I wouldn't sort of give him that title myself, but he's
well, he calls himself a shaman, but he's not willing to talk about how he became a shaman, what being a shaman means. All of his stories, unfortunately, he's got 3 different types of stories. Either I'm really amazing, and everybody knows it. These people didn't know I was amazing, but they came to understand that I'm amazing. And these people didn't know that I was amazing, and I showed them. And those are literally every one of his stories fits into one of those
3
categories. He tells terribly demeaning stories about other native peoples, like the North Americans, how he went up to visit them, and they realized he was amazing, so they gave him an eagle feather. Yeah. They give him an eagle feather, but they don't realize the eagle is shit because they have the condor in Peru. And then they came and they took the eagle feather away, and he thought, well, I don't need it. And then they came back and they gave him 2 eagle feathers because he was so amazing. Yeah, and it's, and he calls himself a shaman. He's got a restaurant, which I believe is called Shaman. And what he does, he likes to tell stories of these people who've gone into the jungle and drunk ayahuasca, and they come to his restaurant called Shaman, which is a vegan restaurant, and he tells them, oh yes, now you know because you have been in the jungle and you have drunk the ayahuasca, so you are all knowing. And then he turns around and talks about how those people don't know shit, and laughs at them for being silly gringos drinking ayahuasca.
He does.
I mean, this guy has got on top of that, he's terrible. He does.
He's got an ego on him. But
he's all Inca all the time. If you don't believe that if you ask him any questions, we'll talk about this in a minute, then you must believe it's aliens, or you must believe in Atlantis, and you're a moron.
Right. So this is what got a little tiring for us. I mean, I like his work. He did.
He's just
we picked him because of his work in his book, and we were quite excited about meeting him actually, just given that he'd done a bunch of research. But then we thought
it would be some interesting discussions. We would ask him, and he would talk to us, and we would talk to him. And
the instant he heard that I'd been to Peru before, he didn't like that I'd had anything to say or anything to think about these, and the immediate reaction. I mean, I kind of understand the mindset. He's very protective of that culture, and he feels everything as a personal affront. I've talked about this a bunch. I think it's how a lot of these people, particularly the guys that have a reputation and their sense of identity is tied to these stories. As soon as you cross that boundary and you're questioning that story and say, well, maybe this isn't. There's all this evidence for the other thing. Then you're attacking them personally, and that's how they respond. So he started off being really snarky about it anyway. But he would straw man anything you said to say, well, you're not taken away from the Incan culture, not saying anything, but there's clearly 3 different styles of architecture. Maybe they've inherited this and done this, and now that, and I'm not talking about aliens and this and that, it's just not even mentioning it. But he will say that, oh well, if you don't think the Incan did it, then therefore you must think aliens did it, and the Incans are really dumb and stupid, just savages. Well, and that's not at all the case. And he would explain this architecture as just organic. They use all the styles. That was his answer, right? It's every style.
Well, yes. So I said, well, what technique did they use? Oh, they used every technique. Could you break that down? Oh, well, if you don't think the Inca did it, you must be stupid. You must think of Atlantis. But I kept pushing him on this because I was like, no, really, I just want to understand how is it that they did this? Like, what can you show me that shows conclusively that the Inca did this? And he then said 2 things. One of them was, look at some of these large blocks. They're on top of little bricks. Therefore, it was all the Incans did that. Therefore, the Incans put the thing on top of the bricks. They
might have pried it up there. Yeah.
And the other thing he said, I don't know if you remember this, but he said, well, you don't understand, but the Incan masters who built this stuff, they used 18% of their brains. We only use 15% of our brains.
Which has actually since been debunked.
And that's why, there's no real study anywhere that shows that we use any type of percentage of our brain. We just use our brains. That's kind of how it works.
Yeah. You have more capacity, sure, but
right. Yeah. So yes, the Incan masters, they were capable of using 18%, whereas we only use 15%. So that and the small bricks were his.
I love this little section here. Yeah, right. And we'll look at the top, because at the top it becomes super evident about what's happened here. But I love this shot because you're seeing the megalithic stuff on the far side. You're seeing the Ikan Pacha, the Incan work, the nice terracing, and then as we walk through, here's obviously like this is an effort to replicate the windows and bloody hell, an effort to replicate. Let me just find where I was again.
What's interesting about these terraces too is that they're agricultural. I mean, they
for sure.
You can use them for defense. They're agricultural, but what's really interesting is that because they're built, the earth is packed in behind these stones. The stones are warmed by the sun. It warms the earth up, 3-something degrees C, so maybe like 6-7 degrees, Fahrenheit or something, right. And that allowed the Incas to grow different crops, food that you would have had to grow in a different climate otherwise.
Yeah. The terracing it was amazing.
It's they were an amazing culture. They did a lot of amazing things. They had a great civilization, and we just can't figure out.
Check this out.
I would love to say that the Inca built all this stuff. I just can't find the proof for it.
Yeah, right.
That's
I'm
how
sure,
I look at it.
I think they built this stuff, and it's been built in homage to the older stuff, and it's pretty evident that this. I mean, again, one guy built all this. Why? Because you walk through this part, and you go, okay, there's lots of examples of this sort of stonework, and then you spin around, and what are you looking at now? It's this incredible megalithic, just different level of construction, and we'll get up. So this last little couple minutes here is the really interesting stuff. It's up at the top. So again, we've sort of established that, and again, Ollantaytambo's on top of a mountain. You can see at the top there some of the really big granite blocks that form the core of the temple. But you can also see how it's been repaired. Like I think this place was in disarray, as Cusco was when the Incan found it, right? But here we go into some of just the massive pieces of granite. I don't think it's even. Would you say you thought it wasn't granite? It was something else. It was just as hard.
Well, some like those fieldstone or the large stones below with the alcoves, I think are straight granite. This stuff I think is what they call either pink or rose rhyolite, which is it's a very heavy hard stone. It's between a 6 and a 7 on the Mohs scale because it's also porphyritic, and porphyritic is when it has different the size of the stones making up. The stone are not all regular sizes. They have larger and smaller pieces. So I think this is sort of like a porphyritic rhyolite.
I love this with the organic work in between the big blocks, and just the masses.
And of course, if you think that's how the Incas they did the whole thing, and if you think that's how the Incas meant it to look, more power to you. But I disagree. And that again, those blocks we just passed, looking on the right. Think about that quarry in China. Because it
looks the same, right?
I look at this stuff and I'm like, Jesus, this stuff is happening everywhere.
Right.
At some time in our prehistory.
So it's just sad. I got mad again because same thing we found in Bolivia, but they've roped off more sections of this when I was here. When I was here a few years before, I took this footage. Now this is the example Marco will use to say, well, clearly they put the blocks under this, so the Inca must have built the thing on top.
Right.
Not at all.
Well,
I'm sure they had the capability with enough people to lift that up and put those blocks there. But it's the different story from lifting it off the ground versus bringing it from the mountains across. You might be lagging a little bit behind me with the audio.
Well, that's what they call the seat, the platform of the carved seat.
Right.
And I think that is probably the wrong way up. I mean, I don't know, but I have a feeling that's part of the complex that was not just a carved seat.
Look at this. These are amazing. These are the big blocks at the top with these incredibly precisely fitted, slotted blocks in between them. And this is where I was filming a couple of years before this with Hajiro was talking through. That's those 3 chicanas. They look like chicanas supposedly, and there's a pyramid. There's a puma there, but it's hard to say what exactly is on there. And they could have been carved later too. And there's the quarry.
Megaliths. And the quarry's on the face of that.
I love this side. This is my favorite thing. This is I had to ask. I said this just. I think on this day I told Mark. I said, look, you really are being quite rude with how you're describing and pigeonholing everyone else that's got a different opinion, because you can't tell me that. I mean, if you're trying to build the temple, it's not 30% of it making it really good is not. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. This is a site that was in ruin, and they clearly went to extraordinary efforts to renovate it and to try and repair it.
Yeah.
Because you can. all this big heavy stuff come from over on the other hillside. It's been moved across. In fact, I've got a good example of this while I'm looking at it. Well, while we've got these blocks here, let me throw up this picture because it's not something many people see. But on the backs, and we actually saw it because I meant to get down here anyway, but during this second trip, it turned out the road was shut, so we had to take the back way. But this is a road that you go up the back way to Ollantaytambo, and you'll notice that the road takes a little diversion around something here. They've actually, when they built the road, they had to move it around a block that is coming from that quarry. This is called the Lazy Stone. It's been graffitied and whatnot. It's massive. This is I didn't get any good pictures of it, but it's a huge block that is the same stone. It's come from the quarry on the other hill. It was destined for the top of the mountain,
the temple.
And with all our equipment and everything, we make roads going around it. Like we're not shifting that thing for anyone.
We're not moving that.
Yeah, not anytime soon. I mean, we could, but it's an awful lot of effort to try and do it. So we just build the road around it. And you trying to tell me that Incan culture and everything we know about them could shift this stone from that quarry on that hilltop down across a big raging river, then up a really steep mountain and put it precisely aligned on top of something.
And what's really funny is that, they like to tell you, well, they had lots of manpower and they had coca. And then they tell you, oh, no, the coca was only for the nobles.
Yeah.
So,
coca's good, but...
It is good, but I don't think
6 men, 300 ton good.
Right. And yeah, this was the stone in particular where he was like, you see how it's on top of these little bricks, therefore, everything here is Inca. And,
I could get all in here.
It's just so poor. Like it's real woolly thinking, I think.
This is see how they respectfully treat the living rock when you have an Uran Pacha.
Yeah.
They kind of just fit it in.
Yeah, Pucapacara has some of the most amazing...
I love this. I don't think you can get in here. I might be leaning over ropes at this point. I do have video footage and lots of images of this actual join between these two blocks. Now, this is... Oh, maybe I can get in here. But there is... You want to talk about... Let me just back that up for a sec. But not being able to fit a hair or anything like that in between it. That's this lip here. And maybe while that's playing, I can try and find...
it looks a lot like some of the Valley Temple, the Sphinx Valley Temple stuff in Egypt. Just
right. Yeah.
I think we should start some kind of support group for people like us that are just obsessed with ancient stonework. I was there. I rubbed it for like a half hour.
Yeah, we definitely touchy, stony, don't we? It's it is part of it's a hazard. You just got to touch them. If I can do it quick, I will find it. If I can't, I can't. And there's the sites. I love this. This is the side of that. The side of the big rock up here. Actually, here you go. I think we've got some picture here. Yeah.
Scoopy on the side.
Mm-hmm. Yep, there it is.
And look at that curve right there too.
And then this wall.
Yeah, it's all done, clearly done by the same people. You know what? Let's just grab some small shit, stack it up here, no one will notice.
Yeah.
It won't detract from the overall purpose and aesthetic effect.
Yeah. Just pile up some local stones around these things that we went to all this effort of
similar to what they did in Tiwanaku. If you look at the Kasasaya, they've got the monoliths that
this is just such a nice shot
set up, and then they filled it all in with stone in between, just like they have here.
This is one of my favorite shots coming around the corner to then this. I mean, you got little blocks under this, to be fair. Someone shoved some stuff under there. But yeah, and beautiful megalithic walls here. Just again, the polygonal, irregular, yet insanely precisely fitted with knobs and things. Just sort of absolute characteristic of...
And I do actually I think we might even talk about this in another another podcast, because doing what we do, people send us stuff all the time. Have you seen this? Check this out. What do you think of this?
Right.
And actually, if there's stuff that you want us to look at and review, please send it in, because we'll take a look at it. Why not?
Yeah.
But anyway, so some friends of mine were like, there's these guys, they did this documentary. It's called The Unholy Sea, and it's all about Cusco and Ollantaytambo and all this stuff, and it's pretty interesting. You should check it out. So I checked it out, and it took a while for their agenda to become sort of clear, but it did become clear after a while that it was all about.
Thanks for making me watch that.
You're welcome. These sort of sodomite giants before the flood who were hanging out, eating all the food, shagging each other because God hadn't provided women for them, and so they were sort of exterminated by the people, but the humans,
by an
before
angel.
they were
by an angry
right,
angel.
And the angel, and it's all in the Bible.
Rain down fire. They were buggering each other far too much.
They were buggering each other
God just
too
went,
much.
Nuke them from orbit.
Yeah, they didn't want to wait for the women. And there's numerous kind of hilarious things about that documentary, including how they were sure the Bolivian government was following them around.
That was
a photo of them, which is classic.
Maybe we talk about that in another podcast, but we can definitely get into it.
But anyway, their agenda was all of these ancient sites were built by giants in the before time. Right. And there's a site in France called Castelnau where there actually were. If you want to prove that there were giants, I would start there, because those bones were examined by actual scientists and doctors at the time, and there's some information on that. There may well have been big humanoids.
I'm sure there are.
Say there weren't.
Homo Gigantopithecus was a real thing.
Right, but I am going to say that they didn't build any of these sites, and I just 4 hours of documentary that I went through about these giants, and all I want to say is doorways. Look at the doorways.
Small.
All of the doorways are like 7 feet tall. I don't know what 15-foot tall and larger people are going to build all these sites and put 7-foot doors in. It's just, look at the doors. I could have saved you all of that work wandering around Cusco and everywhere else. Look at the doors.
Yeah,
people.
I had a lot to say about those films when I watched them. I remember I was just walls of text at Luke, who'd shown them to me, and then
I sat through that. I was like, you know what, Ben,
you have to sit through it. Thanks, man. But my objection was twofold. One was one skull. Show me one skull. I mean, when you're inventing vast global conspiracies that involve, no doubt, tens of thousands of people, entire worldwide organizations, several of them, all combining together, and not a single person is telling you a different story, and you need to invent all of that to make your case fit, you're going to have difficulty in convincing most rational people, I'm afraid. I don't care what it says in the Bible. Sorry if you're a big believer in the biblical lens on history, but not. I mean, I think it's a recollection. I mean, floods happen, but that's... The flood of Noah actually wasn't even the Younger Dryas cataclysm. That was a specific event. You look at Randall Carlson's website. He talks about what happened in that particular area, because guess what? All the Bible stuff, that'll happen in a particular area on the planet. We can all pretty much nail that down. There were a few other historians running around at the same time. But the other thing is and it's described as these massive, savage, loincloth-wearing giants that were buggering each other and just killing all the people that we had to fight. And they built these big sites because they were so big and strong. I would say two things. One is big and strong does not account for anything remotely like what we see at Baalbek and the really big stuff. I don't care if you're 15 foot tall, you ain't moving an 1,800-ton stone any which way. And big and strong doesn't mean a damn thing when it comes to precision surfaces and the types of precision work we see.
Less likely to be capable of precision.
Right. But anyway, that was another
but
podcast.
if you're into giants and the Vatican, feel free to check that out.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a little more detail. I think it's Gen 6 Productions. Look, joke's on us. They got 100,000 subscribers or whatever. He's been doing it for a while, and it's good work. There's lots of good work, and I like the intent. It's very agenda driven in terms of the conclusions. I'm open to be convinced by new evidence. I think new evidence and changing your mind when you see it is a mark of intelligence. I'm happy to be challenged on any of this stuff. In fact, I am. We sort of have conversations with people frequently about it. I appreciate it. But yeah, we'll get into that. We will do a bit of that, because I think there's an awful lot of topics, and that's one of the risks in this field, is that there is so much, you call it woo-woo aliens, Bible, this, angels, demons, giants, all sorts of explanations that people are trying to drive for whatever reason. I think ultimately the conclusion you come to is there's definitely something else has been going on in the past. I happen to think that this hypothesis that humans have been here, the fossil record supports it. We've been here for at least 200,000 years. It's quite likely, look at human nature in the last several hundred years of how we can, when conditions are right, advance in terms of civilization and technology. And guess what? There's all this evidence that says a massive comet, the biggest damn thing to hit us in 5 million years, plowed into the planet only 12,000 years ago. And all of our recorded history happens just after that. There's global flooding. The sea levels came up 300-400 feet. Look at all the myths of flood. I mean, those things are telling a story. And that hypothesis, when you use that and you look through that and you look at these ancient sites and you look at the mysteries of the biggest, the oldest, the oldest shit is always the nicest, the most precise. That hypothesis fits this picture, the inheritance picture. So, that's all we're looking at. And I'm open to all the evidence.
What's going to remain after an event of that level? What's going to remain? Large stone buildings.
Right.
That's pretty much what's going to remain.
And what do we see? Large stone buildings.
Remnants of large stone buildings that we struggle to explain the construction techniques.
And that are ruined by some form of, as if there was a cataclysm. There's just a lot of evidence for this. But in any case, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Another podcast. We will keep pushing them out. Please support us. Patreon, PayPal. Anything you can do to help us out there would be greatly appreciated. And, particularly if you want us to look at any topic, happy to do it.
On behalf of Zahi Hawass, I would like to say...
He's put me on the spot.
I would like to say... And, have a great week.
Indeed. Cheers.